A poor girl saves a millionaire from drowning in the freezing river. When their worlds collide, an unexpected connection sparks that will change everything. Tell us in the comments where you're listening from, and subscribe so you don't miss a single story. The golden glow of Christmas lights shimmered across the bridge, flickering like fragile promises made to no one in particular, wrapping the freezing December evening in a warmth that didn't truly exist. Traffic crawled forward in frustrated waves, horns blaring in uneven bursts while exhaust fumes mixed with the sweet, smoky scent of roasted chestnuts drifting from vendors sheltering under umbrellas. Beneath decorated lampposts, between rows of cars locked at red lights, a small figure in a faded long-sleeved red dress moved with practiced urgency. Emily, 7 years old, carried eyes far too alert for her age, eyes that measured danger before wonder. She clutched a worn basket of candy canes to her chest as if it were armor. Her bare feet, hardened beyond childhood, crossed the icy asphalt with the careful precision of someone who had learned survival long before she ever learned how to read. The city vibrated with pre-Christmas desperation. Shoppers rushed past, weighed down by bags of gifts they couldn't afford, faces stretched tight with forced cheer and obligation. Emily understood that pressure better than most adults ever would. These last days before Christmas were never neutral. They were either feast or famine. Tonight the cold was clearly winning. 23 candy canes sold in 4 hours. Not enough. Never enough. She stepped up to a silver sedan and tapped lightly on the passenger window, her fingers stiff and numb from the cold. Inside, the woman stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, refusing to acknowledge her existence. It was the familiar look of someone who believed that seeing suffering would somehow make them responsible for it. That was when Emily noticed the red SUV in the far lane, polished and expensive, standing out beneath the harsh sodium streetlights. Behind the wheel sat a man in a charcoal grey suit, his head slumped at an unnatural angle against the window. Even from that distance, something about him felt wrong. Emily recognized that posture immediately. The boneless exhaustion that appears when a person has nothing left to give, nothing left to hold themselves upright. The traffic lights switched to green. Cars around him began to move. The red SUV stayed perfectly still. Horns erupted behind it, sharp and angry. Drivers swerved around, shouting through open windows. No one stopped. No one checked. But Emily didn't look away. Without warning, the SUV lurched forward, its wheels snapping sharply as the driver's unconscious foot pressed down on the accelerator. The vehicle cut violently across 2 lanes, clipping a taxi that spun sideways with a shriek of tires and metal. People screamed. Emily's basket slipped from her hands, candy canes scattering across the wet asphalt like red and white bones. The SUV surged straight toward the bridge's decorative railing, those delicate Christmas lights suddenly looking thin, fragile, and useless against what was coming. Time shattered into crystal-clear fragments. Emily saw the SUV slam into the railing, saw the metal buckle and fold like paper, saw the front of the vehicle lift, tilt, and then slide over the edge with a terrible, graceful slowness. The splash followed a heartbeat later, a violent sound that ripped through the noise of traffic like a scream tearing through silence. For a suspended moment, the world seemed to stop breathing. Cars finally halted, not out of urgency, but shock. People stepped out onto the bridge, phones already raised, capturing tragedy in perfect focus. Emily was already running, her small legs pumping, her red dress flashing between the Christmas lights. She heard someone shout for her to stop, but the voice carried no meaning. All that mattered was the widening ripple on the river's surface, the dark water already closing over the spot where the SUV had vanished. She reached the railing and climbed without hesitation, her small hands gripping twisted metal still warm from the impact. Below her, the river churned black and swollen, hungry with rain, the SUV's taillights glowing faintly beneath the surface like the eyes of something drowning. She could see him clearly now, the man in the grey suit trapped behind glass, his hands striking the window in slow, panicked motions. He was waking up. Finally waking up. Just in time to understand he was about to die. Their eyes met across the water, and something passed between them that needed no words. "Help me, I'm coming." Emily jumped, The river hit her with brutal cold, ripping the breath from her lungs and filling her mouth with the taste of metal and mud. The current tried to claim her instantly, dragging her sideways with relentless force. But Emily had spent her life fighting currents stronger than water. Poverty, invisibility, a world that preferred she disappear quietly. She kicked hard, her thin arms slicing through water that felt thick and heavy, chasing the fading red glow below. The river was deeper than she had imagined, darker, colder. Her lungs burned and screamed, but she forced herself down, following the light until her hands struck cold metal and fractured glass. The SUV rested on its side, the driver's window angled upward, still intact but cracked into spiderweb patterns. Through the broken glass she saw him clearly now, Daniel Miller, though she didn't know his name yet. 42 years old, self-made millionaire, owner of 3 companies and no reason left to live. His eyes were wide with terror, his mouth opening and closing uselessly as water rushed in around him. Emily slammed both fists against the glass, tiny hammers against something far too strong. She motioned frantically for him to cover his face, then grabbed the loose piece of railing still clenched in her hand. She swung with everything she had. On the third strike, the glass exploded outward in a cloud of glittering fragments. Water rushed violently into the cabin. Emily seized his arm and pulled, surprised by how thin it felt beneath the expensive suit. He was heavy, stunned, fighting the water more than helping her, but she refused to let go. She held on with the grip of someone who had learned early that releasing meant losing everything. They burst to the surface together, gasping and choking. The current dragged them downstream, away from the bridge, into darker water where the Christmas lights couldn't reach. Emily's legs trembled, her strength fading fast, but she kept Daniel's head above water, swimming with one arm while the other locked around his chest, pushing toward the distant shore with faith stronger than reason. The river still roared around them, cold water clawing at their legs and arms like invisible hands. Daniel coughed, choking on swallowed water, and Emily slipped for a fraction of a second in the relentless current. Every breath was a battle, every movement a desperate fight against the cold that threatened to lock her muscles. For a heartbeat, the bridge above seemed impossibly far, the Christmas lights flickering like distant mocking ghosts. Even the wail of approaching sirens couldn't break the sense that danger hadn't left them, relentless and unyielding. Somehow, impossibly, her feet touched mud, then stones, then solid ground. They collapsed onto the riverbank together, 2 bodies washed ashore like broken driftwood, coughing water and blood, and the bitter taste of almost dying. Sirens wailed closer now, red and blue lights bleeding into the Christmas glow. Emily's vision blurred as darkness crowded the edges. The last thing she saw before losing consciousness was the man's face turned toward her, wearing an expression she had never seen directed at her before. Gratitude, pure and absolute. She didn't know that this moment would change both their lives. The river had tried to take them. Instead, it gave them a second chance. And in a world obsessed with endings, that beginning mattered more than anything else. Hospitals have their own kind of silence, the kind that hums beneath fluorescent lights and smells of disinfectant and fear. In one corner room under harsh white light, a girl in a faded red dress lay motionless on a narrow bed, her small chest rising and falling in shallow, stubborn breaths. Emily looked even smaller against crisp white sheets, tangled hair spread like a dark halo on the pillow. The river had left its marks, bruises blooming along her arms, lips tinged faintly blue from cold that had seeped into her bones. A nurse adjusted the blanket with the gentleness of someone who had children of her own. The doctor beside her, a man in his 50s with deep grooves between his brows, studied the chart and then the child. "She's stable," he said quietly. "Exhaustion, hypothermia, mild water aspiration. But her heart is strong." He glanced at the small, bruised knuckles. "Stronger than most adults who come through here." The nurse shook her head in disbelief. The doctor's gaze lingered on Emily's face. Children were not supposed to carry that kind of courage, or that kind of burden. Across the hall, Daniel Miller blinked against sharp light as consciousness dragged him upward. For a moment he had no idea where he was. The ceiling was sterile, unfamiliar. Pain flared along his ribs. A monitor beeped. His throat burned with the memory of water. Then it came back in jagged flashes, The bridge, the railing, the sudden crushing cold. And then eyes. Dark, determined eyes in a small, frightened face. "You're awake," a nurse said from the door. "Mr. Miller, you're at St. Vincent's Hospital. You were in an accident, but you're safe now." "How bad?" he managed. The nurse checked his chart. "Mild concussion, bruised ribs, water in the lungs, but we got to you in time. Honestly, Mr. Miller, you're lucky." Lucky? Daniel let out a humorless breath. He turned his head slightly. "The girl," he rasped. "The one who... Was she real?" The nurse's expression softened. "Yes. She's real. She's here. She's the reason you're breathing right now." Daniel closed his eyes. In the darkness, he saw again that impossibly small body cutting through black water, felt the grip of tiny hands refusing to let him sink. The door to the emergency department burst open down the hall. "Where is she? Please, someone. Where is my daughter?" The voice cut through the corridor like a blade sharpened by terror. The woman who stormed in was breathing hard from running, coat half-zipped, hair pulled back in a rush. She looked like someone who had been taught by life never to expect good news. "Ma'am, you need to calm down," a receptionist started, but the woman gripped the counter, knuckles white. "They called me. They said my little girl, Emily, was brought here from the river. Please, A nurse stepped forward. "You're Emily's mother?" The woman nodded so fast it was almost a tremor. "Yes. Sarah. Sarah Collins. Is she alive?" The hallway compressed around that question. The nurse's face softened. "She's alive. She's stable. She's been through a lot, but the doctors are taking good care of her. Come, I'll take you to her." Sarah's legs buckled with relief, and she clung to the counter, tears springing to her eyes. As she followed the nurse, her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She had been at the diner wiping down tables when they called. "Your daughter. Accident. River. Hospital." Now each footstep felt like walking into a storm she could not control. They stopped at a doorway. Sarah couldn't bring herself to look. The nurse squeezed her arm gently, then stepped aside. Sarah forced herself to raise her eyes. The sight stole what little air she had left. Emily lay so still, too still. Tubes and wires traced delicate lines across her small body, machines beeping in quiet rhythm. Someone had removed her soaked red dress. It lay folded on a chair, a darker stain where river water and blood had mingled. Sarah moved to the bedside as if in a dream. Her hands hovered above Emily's face, afraid to touch, afraid she might shatter this thin, miraculous thing called survival. Finally, she brushed a trembling finger along her daughter's cheek. Warm. Still warm. "Hey, baby," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's Mama. I'm here." The doctor stepped in quietly. "Miss Collins." She straightened, wiping her face, trying to assemble herself into something like dignity. "She's going to be okay?" Sarah asked, and there was a lifetime condensed into that single sentence. The doctor nodded. "We're optimistic. She's very brave. The cold took a toll, and she pushed her body far beyond what we'd expect, but we got to her in time. She needs rest, warmth, and monitoring, but yes, I believe she's going to be okay." Sarah let out another shaky breath. Brave. The word caught on something raw inside her. "What happened?" she asked. "They said the river." "I don't understand. She was supposed to be selling candy canes on the bridge. I was only gone an hour." The doctor hesitated. "There was a car accident. A vehicle went over the side into the river. Your daughter jumped in after it." Sarah stared at him. "That's not funny. She's 7. The doctor's gaze did not waver. "I'm not joking, Ms. Collins. Witnesses say she climbed the railing and leapt into the river before anyone else moved. She helped the driver escape the vehicle." He paused. "She saved his life." The world tilted, not with the violence of an earthquake, but with the quiet gravity of a truth that cannot be absorbed all at once. Sarah's mind struggled to hold two images simultaneously. Emily falling asleep on her shoulder on the bus. Emily breaking car windows underwater and dragging a grown man to the surface. Pride and terror rose together in her chest. Her knees gave out, and she sank into the plastic chair beside the bed, pressing her forehead against Emily's hand. "Why would you do that?" she whispered. "Why would you risk everything? when we already have so little?" Across the hall, Daniel lay staring at the ceiling. He remembered the months that had led here. Late nights at the office, numbers on screens replacing any sense of meaning. Somewhere along the line, he had stopped caring whether he woke up each day. He hadn't fallen asleep at the wheel because he was tired. He'd fallen asleep because part of him had stopped believing his life was worth staying awake for. Now he knew that, while he had been quietly drifting toward oblivion, a child who had every reason to give up on the world had chosen to fight for his place in it. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Dr. Patel stepped in. "Mr. Miller, how are you feeling?" Daniel let out a slow breath. "Like I've been hit by a river." The doctor gave a small nod, then added carefully, "I just spoke with the girl's mother, Emily's. She arrived a few minutes ago." The sound of her name sent a strange warmth and ache through Daniel at once. Of course she had a mother. Someone who loved her fiercely enough to storm a hospital in the middle of the night. He wondered suddenly, and with uncomfortable clarity, if anyone would have done the same for him. Dr. Patel studied his face. "Mr. Miller, you should know what that little girl did for you. Understanding that might change some things." Daniel turned his head. "Change what?" The doctor glanced toward the open doorway, where faintly from down the hall, the sound of a woman's muffled sobs could just be heard. "Perhaps it's better if you see for yourself." And with that, the man whose life had almost ended alone in a river realized that his story was no longer his alone to waste. Morning crept in, hesitant light slipping through hospital blinds, painting pale stripes across the sterile floor. Emily stirred slowly, torn from deep sleep by the steady beeping of monitors and distant voices echoing down the hallway. For a moment, disoriented, she didn't know where she was. The ceiling was too white, the air too warm, the mattress impossibly soft compared to anything she had ever slept on. Then fragments of memory returned: the bridge, the red SUV, the freezing river. The man's terrified eyes behind cracked glass. Her body ached from head to toe, deep soreness threading into her bones, yet she was alive. That simple fact felt both ordinary and miraculous. She turned her head with care and saw her mother slumped in the chair beside the bed, still in yesterday's clothes, one hand resting protectively near Emily's arm, even in sleep. Sarah's face looked older in the morning light, worry lines etched deeper than Emily remembered. Her other hand clutched a wadded tissue, proof of tears Emily hadn't been awake to witness. Guilt twisted inside her chest. She hadn't meant to scare Mama. She had only wanted to help. And yet, watching her mother's exhausted face, Emily understood with a child's clarity that Sarah had spent the night imagining a world without her. "Mama," Emily whispered, her voice rough, almost unfamiliar. Sarah's eyes snapped open, alert and sharp, a lifetime of light sleep and constant worry boiling into a single heartbeat. She stared for a moment, just to confirm. Emily was really there. Then it hit her. Relief. Pure, crushing relief. Her face collapsed, hands flying to cup Emily's small face. "Baby. Oh, baby, you're awake." Her thumbs traced Emily's cheeks, gentle, checking, comforting. "How do you feel? Does anything hurt?" Emily's throat was raw, her limbs heavy. "I'm okay. So I'm sorry I scared you." Sarah's laugh and sob tangled together. "Scared me. Emily Rose Collins, and you jumped into a river. You could have died." Her voice cracked. The terror of the night poured back, raw and unstoppable. Then pride surged, fierce and overwhelming. "You saved someone's life," Sarah said, quieter now, almost a whisper. "A grown man. The doctors, they said he wouldn't have made it without you." Emily looked down at her hands on the white blanket. Small, bruised, ordinary. And yet they had done something extraordinary. "I saw him drowning," she said simply. "I couldn't just watch." Silence. Sarah closed her eyes, wrestling with emotions too big to name. Heroism and recklessness, bravery and danger. Sometimes they were the same. Finally she spoke. I know you couldn't. You have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known." A soft knock interrupted them. Dr. Patel appeared in the doorway, chart in hand, warm but professional. "Good morning, Emily. How are you feeling?" "Tired, sore, but okay," she said. He nodded, checking her vitals quickly. "Exactly what I'd expect. You put your body through something extraordinary yesterday. Your lungs are clear, temperature normal. You'll be fine physically, but I want you to stay today for observation." Sarah nodded, grateful for any extra supervision. Dr. Patel turned to Emily. "When you saw that car go into the water, why did you jump in?" Emily thought a moment. "I didn't decide. I just knew I had to. Nobody else was helping, and if I didn't, he would die." The doctor nodded slowly. "There's someone who wants to thank you. The man you saved. Daniel Miller. He's asked to meet you, if you and your mother are okay with it." Emily's eyes lit up. "He's okay? Alive?" Dr. Patel smiled. "Yes. Bruised ribs, minor concussion, but otherwise fine." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, but just a few minutes. Emily needs rest." As Dr. Patel stepped away, Sarah smoothed Emily's hair. "Remember, baby, we don't know him. Be polite, you don't owe him anything." Footsteps approached slowly. Then he appeared in the doorway. Emily recognized him immediately, though he looked nothing like the terrified man behind glass. Daniel Miller stood uncertainly, one hand bracing the doorframe. Hospital clothes hung loose, dark hair messy, a purple bruise spreading across his temple. But it was his eyes that held her attention, red-rimmed, exhausted, filled with gratitude, shame, and a searching wonder, as if trying to understand how someone so small had saved him when he'd nearly let the water take him. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Sarah moved closer to Emily's bedside. Daniel struggled to begin. I don't even know how to start. I'm Daniel. You're Emily." He said her name like it was sacred. Emily nodded. Daniel stepped forward, pausing. "What you did yesterday, jumping into that river, breaking the window, pulling me out, you saved my life. You're 7 and you saved me when I couldn't save myself, when I'd stopped trying." His voice dropped to a whisper, raw and unguarded. Emily looked at him with clear, unfiltered eyes. "You were so scared in the car. When you woke up, I could see it." Daniel nodded, jaw tight. "I was terrified. I thought I was going to die. Then I saw you... this little girl in a red dress. I couldn't understand why you were there, why you weren't running." He crouched slowly, wincing, meeting her at eye level. "Why did you do it, Emily? Why risk your life for someone you didn't even know?" Emily's answer was simple, unshakable. "Because you needed help, and I could help, so I did." Daniel's eyes filled, tears finally breaking free. He lowered his head, shoulders shaking with silent sobs, overwhelmed by the purity of her words. Someone with so little, barefoot selling candy canes in the cold, had given everything to save someone who had everything and had stopped caring. Sarah watched him break down, and despite her caution, felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't just gratitude. This was a man confronting himself, and impossibly her 7-year-old daughter had held up that mirror. Daniel lifted his head, wiping his eyes. His gaze met Emily's, changed. Not just gratitude anymore. Purpose, fragile, new, like the first breath after nearly drowning. Sarah realized suddenly, after this, none of their lives would ever be the same. The woman with the camera phone appeared first, then the man with the press badge, both moving through the hospital corridor like sharks who'd caught the scent of blood in the water. Daniel saw them from his corner table in the cafeteria, watched them stop at the nurse's station, heard the phrase that made his stomach drop. "We're looking for the little girl, the one who jumped in the river. Emily Collins. Which room?" The nurse's face went carefully blank, the practiced expression of someone who'd learned to protect patients from vultures. "I can't give out that information." But the woman with the camera was already typing on her phone, probably pulling strings, calling sources. Daniel stood without thinking, coffee forgotten. Sarah stepped into the cafeteria exhausted, counting coins with automatic precision as she joined the line. $2 and change, enough for coffee if she skipped everything else. She was so focused, she didn't notice Daniel until he was beside her, his voice urgent and low. "Don't go back to Emily's room yet." She looked up sharply, instantly alert to danger. "What? Why?" He gestured toward the hallway. "There are reporters, at least 2, looking for her, asking which room." Sarah's face went pale, then hard as stone. The coins slipped from her hand, scattering across the tile with small metallic sounds. She didn't bend to pick them up. "They can't. She's 7. She's been through enough." Daniel watched her hands curl into fists, watched protective fury transform her from exhausted mother into something fierce and immovable. "I'll handle it," he said. The words came out before he'd fully formed the thought. Sarah's eyes snapped to his face, searching for manipulation, for hidden angles. "You? Why would you do that?" He didn't have a clean answer that didn't sound self-serving. "Because I can. Because I have lawyers on retainer who specialize in exactly this kind of thing. And because your daughter saved my life, and the least I can do is make sure people don't turn her into a headline she didn't ask for." For a long moment, Sarah just stared at him. Then slowly she nodded. "Do it fast, before they find her room." Daniel made 3 phone calls that took less than 5 minutes. The first to his attorney, words like minor, hospital privacy, and injunction falling from his mouth with the ease of someone who'd spent years in boardrooms where power was currency. The second to hospital administration, leveraging his family's name and the charitable donations his father had made for a decade. The third to building security, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone used to being obeyed. By the time Sarah had retrieved her scattered coins, the reporters were being escorted out, their protests fading down the hallway. The nurse at the station caught Daniel's eye and nodded once, a small gesture of solidarity. Sarah watched it all happen with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. When the hallway cleared, she turned to him. "That's what money does," she said quietly. "Not accusation, just observation. It makes problems disappear." Daniel shook his head. "It makes some problems disappear, doesn't fix the ones that matter." He gestured toward the cafeteria. "Can we talk? Just for a minute? I need to explain why I'm still here, why I haven't gone back to my life and left you alone." Sarah studied him, weighing exhaustion against curiosity, then nodded toward a table by the window. They sat like combatants at a negotiation neither had asked for. "The doctor said you fell asleep at the wheel," Sarah said, not wasting time on pleasantries. Daniel winced. "I've been running on empty for a long time. Somewhere between the office and the bridge, my body decided it was done pretending." The admission felt dangerous, but sitting across from the mother of the girl who dragged him from death made lying feel obscene. "I didn't care if I made it home. I wouldn't say I wanted to die. But I stopped caring if I lived." Sarah's eyes softened just slightly. "But you fought. When Emily broke that window, you grabbed her hand. People who really want to die don't do that." The words cut through layers of numbness he'd been nurturing for years. "Your daughter is the bravest person I've ever met," Daniel said, swallowing hard. "I've sat in boardrooms with men who control billions, and none would have done what she did." Sarah let out a breath almost like a laugh, but there was nothing light in it. "You call it bravery. I call it a problem I don't know how to solve. I raised her to help people because no one helped us. Now I live with the fact that she takes it more seriously than anyone expected. She almost died saving you. That doesn't make me hate you, but you're part of a story that nearly ended very differently for us." Daniel looked at his hands, at faint cuts along his knuckles. "I'm sorry. Not in the polite way. I'm sorry my emptiness spilled into your daughter's life." Sarah watched him carefully, seeing not the suit or the power he'd just wielded, but a man drowning long before his car hit water. "What do you do, Daniel, when you're not busy almost dying?" He managed a grim smile. "I run my father's company, tech imports, logistics. On paper, I'm the definition of success. Yet every night I lie in an expensive bed, wondering how I built a life so full of things and so empty of reasons." Sarah shrugged. "Hard is hard, hungry or rich, just looks different. But you have something I don't, choice. If your life makes you miserable, you can walk away." I can't walk away from rent or shoes my kid grows out of too fast. The words landed harder than any therapy session. Choice. He'd spent years feeling trapped, and here was a woman held by far harsher realities, telling him he had what she didn't. I don't know how to walk away, he admitted. I've spent so long being my father's son that I don't remember who I wanted to be. Sarah tilted her head. Maybe that's the work Emily gave you. You get to find out. Most people don't get that kind of reset. Her phone buzzed. One glance and her posture shifted. Emily's awake. I need to go. She stood, then looked at him with something approaching respect. Thank you. For the reporters. For using what you have to protect her instead of just feeling guilty about having it. The distinction mattered, and they both knew it. Daniel rose. Can I see her? Just to know she's okay. Sarah hesitated, then nodded slowly. 5 minutes. Then you leave us alone for a while. We need to figure out what normal looks like again. But as Sarah walked toward Emily's room with Daniel following at a careful distance, she realized normal had already shifted beneath their feet. The man who'd made 3 phone calls and moved mountains with casual authority wasn't going to disappear easily. And more complicated still, she wasn't entirely sure she wanted him to. Emily had jumped into freezing water because she couldn't watch someone drown. Sarah was starting to understand her daughter had pulled both of them out that night, Daniel from the river, and her from the kind of loneliness that makes you forget some people might actually mean what they say. It was terrifying. But somewhere beneath the fear, something else stirred. Hope, fragile and unwelcome, that maybe not everyone with power used it to take. Maybe some used it to protect. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth the risk of letting him closer. 2 days passed before Daniel showed up at their apartment unannounced, standing in the hallway with a teddy bear in a red dress and uncertainty written across his face. Sarah opened the door already halfway to suspicious, Emily peeking around her mother's leg with undisguised curiosity. I wanted to make sure she was okay, Daniel said, holding up the bear like a peace offering, and to bring her something. Before Sarah could decide whether to close the door or let him in, Emily's delighted gasp decided for her. She looks like me. On the bridge, Sarah sighed, recognizing defeat, and stepped aside. Shoes off, and you're not staying long. The apartment was small enough to see everything from the entryway, worn furniture, drawings taped to walls, a life lived in careful frugality. But what struck Daniel wasn't the poverty, it was the warmth. More home in this cramped space than his penthouse had ever been. Emily dragged him to the tiny kitchen table, chattering about the bear's potential names, while Sarah watched from the doorway with arms crossed. The knock came 20 minutes later, sharp and impatient. Sarah opened it to find Marcus, her neighbor from down the hall, a man in his 50s who'd lived in the building longer than anyone. His eyes went immediately to Daniel, sitting at their table. Sarah. Word in the building is you got company. Rich company. Sarah's jaw tightened. Marcus, this isn't... But he was already stepping inside uninvited, his gaze moving from Daniel's expensive watch to his tailored clothes with open distrust. This the guy from the news? The one Emily pulled out of the river? Daniel stood slowly, reading the hostility like a language he'd forgotten he spoke. I'm Daniel Miller, and yes, Emily saved my life. Marcus's laugh was short and bitter. Saved your life so you could roll up here and what? Feel better about yourself. Use them to clean your conscience. The accusation hung in the small space like smoke. Emily's smile faded, her eyes moving between the adults with growing concern. Marcus, that's enough, Sarah said firmly. But Marcus wasn't finished. You know what guys like him do, Sarah? They show up with expensive toys and promises, make you feel special for 5 minutes, then disappear back to their towers when the novelty wears off. Meanwhile, you're left explaining to Emily why her new friend doesn't call anymore. Daniel felt each word land like a physical blow, mostly because part of him feared Marcus was right. I'm not using anyone, he said quietly. I'm just trying to... To what? Marcus interrupted. Make yourself feel less guilty. Your guilt's not her problem. She's 7 and she almost died. Let them be. The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. Emily had retreated to Sarah's side, the bear clutched against her chest. Sarah looked at Daniel, really looked at him, and he could see the doubt Marcus had planted taking root. "Maybe he's right," she said slowly. "Maybe this is just you trying to feel better about what happened. And when you're done feeling better, we're still here counting coins for bus fare and you're back in your perfect life." Daniel's throat tightened. He wanted to argue, to insist his intentions were pure, but the truth was more complicated. He didn't entirely know why he kept coming back. Only that the alternative, returning to his empty apartment and pretending this hadn't changed everything, felt impossible. "You're right," Daniel said finally, the words harder than any business negotiation. "I don't know if I'm here for the right reasons. Maybe part of me is trying to fix myself through Emily. But I also know that since she pulled me out of that river, I can't go back to who I was, and I don't want to." He looked at Sarah. "You told me in the hospital I had a choice. I'm trying to make the right one, but I don't know what that looks like yet. If you want me to leave and never come back, I will. But if you give me a chance to prove I'm not what he thinks I am, I'll do whatever it takes." Marcus snorted. "Words are cheap." "Then let me show you," Daniel replied, meeting his eyes. "Not with money, with time, with showing up, with being someone Emily doesn't have to be disappointed by." Sarah studied him for a long moment, while Marcus waited for her to do the sensible thing and send the rich man away. Emily tugged at her mother's sleeve. "I like him, Mama. He doesn't look at us the way other people do, like we're invisible." The child's observation cut through adult cynicism with uncomfortable accuracy. Sarah exhaled slowly. "One dinner," she said. "You help cook. You do dishes. And Marcus stays too, because if you're going to prove you're not what he thinks, you can prove it to both of us." It was a test, and everyone in the room knew it. Daniel nodded. "Deal." Dinner was tense and strange and oddly illuminating. Daniel chopped vegetables under Sarah's instruction, while Marcus watched from a chair like a skeptical referee. Emily provided running commentary about everything from her bear's favorite foods to why spaghetti was the best invention ever. Slowly, grudgingly, the hostility in the room began to ease. Not disappear, trust wasn't built that quickly, but soften around the edges. When Daniel admitted he'd never actually cooked a full meal before, Marcus laughed outright. "Man makes millions and can't boil pasta. That's the system for you." But there was less venom in it, more something approaching pity. By the time they sat down to eat, the apartment had found an uneasy rhythm. 4 people from completely different worlds, sharing mismatched plates and wondering how they'd ended up here. After Emily fell asleep on the couch, Bear tucked under her arm, the 3 adults stood in the small kitchen doing dishes. Marcus dried while Daniel washed, Sarah putting things away. "I still don't trust you," Marcus said bluntly. "But you showed up. That's more than most would do." Daniel nodded, accepting the partial truce. "I'll keep showing up until you either trust me or tell me to stop." Marcus grunted, which might have been approval. When he left, Sarah walked Daniel to the door. "That was hard," she said, "having someone call you out like that." "He wasn't wrong," Daniel admitted. "About most of it. I'm trying to fix something broken inside me, but I'm also trying to do right by Emily. Both things can be true." Sarah leaned against the doorframe. "You keep saying you want to change, so tell me what that actually means, because right now it just looks like you're visiting poverty on weekends and calling it transformation." The challenge was clear. Daniel took a breath. "I'm meeting with my board next week to tell them I'm stepping down as CEO. Not completely out, but I can't keep running a company I don't believe in just because my father built it. I'm starting a fund for kids like Emily. That's not charity or guilt. That's purpose." He paused. "And I know that sounds like rich guy redemption arc nonsense, but it's the only thing that's felt real since I woke up in that hospital." Sarah studied him in the flickering hallway light. "If you're serious, prove it. Don't just throw money at problems. Show up. Do the work. Be someone Emily can look up to, not because you're rich, but because you became someone worth knowing." Daniel nodded, understanding this was both permission and warning. "I will." As he left, walking down the stairs Marcus had climbed with suspicion an hour earlier, Daniel realized something had shifted. The test wasn't whether he could impress Sarah or convince Marcus or even make Emily smile. The test was whether he could become someone he didn't recognize in the mirror anymore. Someone who showed up, someone who stayed, someone whose second chance actually meant something beyond survival. The river had tried to take him. Emily had pulled him out. Now the real work began, learning how to live like it mattered. Christmas Eve arrived like a held breath, fragile and full of things unsaid. In their part of the city there were no glowing storefront displays or lavish parties, just tired strings of lights sagging between aging buildings and the distant mix of gasoline and roasted chestnuts. Inside apartment 3C, though, something felt different. The tomato sauce simmering on the stove, the bread warming in the oven, the table set with mismatched plates. None of it was new. But Sarah moved differently. After the river, the hospital, Marcus's accusations and Daniel's answers, she'd decided, if this was the start of a new chapter, she would meet it standing up. Emily stood on a chair by the window, her red boots planted firmly on the cushion, drawing crooked stars in the fogged glass. The bear in a matching dress sat on the sill, supervising the street. "Do you think he's really coming?" she asked. Sarah folded a dish towel. "He said he would. But I've learned not to believe in anything until it's standing right in front of me. If he comes, he comes. If not, we still have spaghetti." Emily frowned. "I think he'll come. He looked different last time, like his eyes woke up." Down on the street, a black sedan eased up to the curb. Daniel stepped out, not in a suit, but a dark coat, cake box in one hand, envelope in the other. He stared at the building like it was a doorway to a parallel life, then went in. By the third floor his pulse hammered. One 7-year-old and her mother scared him more than any boardroom ever had. He knocked. The door flew open. Emily hurled herself at him. "You came!" He steadied the cake. "I did. Turns out I like keeping some promises." Over her head he met Sarah's eyes. She leaned against the frame, arms crossed. "You're late," she said. "The spaghetti was about to give up on you." He lifted the cake box. "I brought dessert. And something else." He raised the envelope. "Can I come in?" She stepped back. Shoes off. Dinner was messy and loud. Emily narrated her week between forkfuls of pasta, insisting the bear get an imaginary plate. Daniel laughed more than he ate, amazed at how real this cramped kitchen felt. Sarah watched, half her attention on Emily, half on measuring whether Daniel was truly showing up. When Emily's eyelids drooped, she tugged Daniel's sleeve. "Presents. Christmas isn't real without presents." Sarah winced. "Damn, we talked about this." Emily folded her arms. "Grown-ups say it's the thought that counts and then forget to think." Daniel laughed. He placed a small, wrapped box before her. "This one's for you." Inside were bright red winter boots, smaller twin to the pair she was wearing, perfect for the bear. "Now she matches me," Emily said, delighted. Daniel smiled. "Exactly. Every hero needs backup." Then he slid the envelope to Sarah. "This one's for you. You decide." Her fingers were steady as she opened it. First, a letter of acceptance, a full scholarship for Emily at a nearby private school. Behind it, notice of a new foundation seeded from his company shares, the Emily Collins Fund. "What is this?" Sarah asked. "A promise," he said. "Your daughter gets choices I never thought about and you never had. I stepped down as CEO, sold enough shares to fund this properly, and I'm joining the foundation full-time, not charity. The first thing in years that feels like it matters." Sarah closed her eyes, remembering Emily and the river. "We'll visit," she said. "No promises until I see it with my own eyes." Daniel nodded. "That's all I'm asking. You don't owe me a yes." Later, after Emily fell asleep tangled in blankets, boots and bear, Sarah walked Daniel to the door. "This doesn't make us even," she said. "It never will." "I know," he said. "This isn't about getting even. You changed my ending. The least I can do is spend my life changing a few beginnings." "Merry Christmas, Daniel," she said. He smiled. "Merry Christmas, Sarah. And tell Emily, thank you. Again." Then he left, carrying nothing but the weight of a life he was finally ready to live differently. Back inside, Sarah watched her daughter sleep. Boots still on, Bear tucked under her arm. The envelope lay open, pages catching the weak Christmas lights. The rent would still be due. The boiler would still break. The world would still be unfair, but somewhere out there, a man who had once closed his eyes at the wheel had chosen to stay awake. Redemption isn't a miracle that erases the past, but a series of quiet, stubborn choices to stop drowning alone.